Hi, Mayor and Council. My name is Jeremy Schmidt. I'm calling to speak in favor of the Missing Middle Housing Initiative tonight. I'm a current resident of Vic West, and I've also lived in Fairfield, Fernwood, Harris Green, downtown, Oak Bay, and Saanich over the previous 13 years. I've moved a lot. I was a renter for 11 and a half of those years, and for the last 1.5 years, I've been the owner of a 560 square foot condo. In my time as a renter, I've been displaced by landlords 3 times for landlord use of property. Relatedly, last month Statistics Canada released their housing survey showing that renters in 2021 were evicted for the following reasons: 63% for landlord use of property, 13% conflict with landlord, 10% demolition, conversion, or major repairs by landlord, and 8% being behind on rent payments. I think this is relevant context, particularly when we contrast these rates with the fact that only about 16% of renters in Victoria live in what can be defined by the census as a single-family home or a suite in a single-family home. Additionally, I have experienced the ladder of the housing ecosystem and understand how it works. Early on as a renter, when I lived on my own, I had several roommates in old houses. Rent was affordable because it was split several ways, with probably too many people living in a home. Over time, that dwindled. I was able to live with 4 roommates, and then 2 roommates, and then 1 roommate, until eventually I became a solo renter, and now I'm the owner of a small condo. I hope to keep moving up this ladder through initiatives like the Missing Middle Housing Initiative. I've also finally experienced what it's like to live in a walkable location. Since I've moved to Vic West, it's the first time in my life that I've lived walking distance to a grocery store. It's completely changed my life. I want to speak briefly about the existing context in the areas of the city where the Missing Middle Housing Initiative would apply. Traditional residential neighborhoods comprise approximately 65% of our land base. According to census data, as I noted earlier, approximately 16% of renters in the city live in single-family dwellings and/or suites attached to them. 84% of renters thus live in multifamily dwellings. The 2012 OCP calls for traditional residential neighborhoods to see up to 3-story multifamily dwellings with a FSR of 1. The vast majority of traditional residential neighborhoods, however, are currently consisting of the following zones: R1A, Rockland Single Family Dwelling District, R1B, Single Family Dwelling District, and so on. I'll now turn to a quick comparison between current zoning and proposed missing middle housing zoning in traditional residential neighborhoods. In terms of site coverage, both the current zoning and proposed missing middle zoning envision up to 40% site coverage. In terms of density, the current zoning in traditional residential neighborhoods envisions up to 0.5 FSR, while the 2012 OCP in traditional residential neighborhoods envisions up to 1.0 FSR. This is essentially consistent with what the Missing Middle Housing Initiative is proposing at up to 1.1 FSR. In terms of height, current R1A zone in traditional residential neighborhoods envisions up to 2.5 stories. The OCP for traditional residential neighborhoods envisions up to 3 stories in some situations, and the proposed missing middle zoning envisions up to 3 stories. In terms of affordability provisions, the current zoning in traditional residential neighborhoods contains no affordability. That is, you can build anything within those zones and you don't have to provide any ounce of affordability. The Missing Middle Housing Initiative introduces affordability provisions in order to reach the maximum density for missing middle housing. In terms of the tenant assistance policy, there's no tenant assistance outside the Residential Tenancy Act that applies to the current zoning in traditional residential neighborhoods. On the other hand, the Missing Middle is proposing to introduce a provision where tenants will get assistance. There's no adaptable units required in current zoning, while the Missing Middle proposes to introduce requiring at least 1 adaptable unit. There's no requirement for secondary suites in current zoning, while the Missing Middle is proposing to require at least 1 secondary suite. There's no requirement for accessible parking in the current zones, while the Missing Middle is proposing to introduce that requirement. There's no requirement for a minimum number of 3-bedroom units in current zoning, while the Missing Middle is proposing to do just that.